In this clip, we're going to talk about set dressing workflows. All right, so go ahead and open the project file for this scene. So it'll be m3-07_begin. So here we have our terrain, and we had gone through the process of creating it and getting it ready, but now we want to add meshes to this and actually build a level. So we're just going to focus on creating the level itself, adding assets, and we'll get into practice of object manipulation and creating a scene. And we'll talk a little bit about being a level artist and what you can do to convey a specific mood. So let's go ahead and get started with going to our prefabs folder, and we've already have a lot of these prefabs ready for you. So if you just import the Unity package for this module, you'll have it all ready. And we're going to go ahead and bring in this rock large, and I'm going to use it to create the bounds of the level itself. So all we're going to do is we're just going to place it in the scene, and we're going to kind of set it up around the edges and start to block this out. Now you can scale this down if you need to. So I'm going to scale it down to about half and then just start placing these rocks in. So I'm switching between the manipulation tools by hitting W, E, and R. So we're going to rotate, and I'm just placing them and just trying to get them in an interesting way in the scene. So I'm happy with that. Let's go ahead and hit Control C, Control V to duplicate. And then at this point, basically what I'll do is I will just start to hit Control C and Control V and then placing them roughly around the edges. It's important to know that static meshes are used mostly in level design. Typically a terrain is really just the ground itself, but what really sets the level off are the arrangement of these static meshes. And it could be trees, it could be rocks, actual buildings that are modeled out, and different things like that. So placing this in, and we're just placing down the first layer of these rocks. Okay. So now at this point, we're just going to rotate them around. And basically the goal at this point is to create these shapes that don't appear to be repeating. And so what I would suggest doing is just rotating them around. You might even adjust their scale a little bit, but you really don't want to indicate that these are all the exact same static mesh. And so doing things like this, where we just kind of change up the overall layout of that. And this particular mesh has lots of different surfaces on it, and so it's easy to break it up as we go through. Okay, and I'm just rotating. And again, I'm not really, I don't have a magic solution for this or anything like that. We're just making sure that it looks good. Now, you'll also need to remember what angle all of this is going to be seen from. So, for example, in the game itself, we're going to be looking at the character kind of from this type of angle. And so if we were to pan around, this is really all that's going to be seen anyway. And so you don't have to spend a lot of time working on this. So we'll do something kind of like this. I'll move it around. And I might even just kind of lower the elevation of some of these a little bit. So as you begin to move those up and down, you get a better idea, and it does look a little bit more natural. So I'm going to do something kind of like this. And sometimes the gizmo itself will reset, especially whenever you use that free transform of the rotation tool by grabbing it right in the middle. And I'm going to leave that one just the way that it is. And then this one we're going to place kind of like that. And I really just don't want anything that looks exactly the same. And I want something that creates these neat little shapes at the bottom just to kind of break up the overall terrain. So we'll do something maybe like this. And then make an adjustment to the overall length of that. Now, looking at this from the top, you can see here that if we were to play the game and the player were to come over into this area, we could kind of start to see in the background. So it might be a good thing to just go ahead and make a couple of copies of this and then maybe orient some of these rocks kind of in the background a little bit. So maybe a little something like that. And like I said, we don't have to do a whole lot to this because this is barely going to be seen anyway. So we'll have something that looks kind of like that. I am going to place a couple back here in the background. And just rotate those. So now that we kind of see how we can manipulate even just these objects to create an environment, what I would suggest doing at this point is just kind of playing around with some of the tools, and you might even create your own little configuration. You don't have to do it exactly like the way that I've done it. You could make the level a little bit larger, you could make it smaller, and things like that. So don't feel obligated to what I'm doing in this. So I've made just a very small little area here. Let's go ahead and start to break up the floor of this with some of these static meshes as well. It's because this really, we have these little hills and things like that, and it doesn't really look all that great, and it's pretty much just open here. And I just want to break up the continuity of everything. So I'm going to hit Control-C, Control-V to copy this rock one more time. And actually, let me hit undo. I just want one of those. And I'm going to scale it down, something pretty small like this. And maybe just kind of bring this out here toward the middle and do something kind of like this. And then maybe even make another copy of that and start to place it over these little hills so that way they're not quite so obvious. And scale that up a little bit. So I want to rotate that to where it doesn't actually look like just a rock kind of sticking off the edge. I want it to kind of transition into that a little bit more. So that looks pretty good. And then maybe we'll do it one more time for this one. And I'm hitting R to switch to the scale tool and E for the rotation tool. Okay. So creating some little shapes like this just to break it up a little bit. All right, awesome. Let me go ahead and bring this forward a little bit just to kind of hide that little hill there. Perfect. Okay, so now we've kind of broken up the floor a little bit. We've given these little pathways into the scene. And now we can start to add props to this scene to really kind of set off the story. Now it's at this point where you would want to figure out what that story is and what do you want to convey to the player. And we'll kind of talk about some of those principles in the next clip.